Welcome to Wolf's Sanctuary. Orchids at 9, lunch at 1, murder in between. Tell us where you're listening from. The case starts now. Nero Wolfe and the widow on the staircase. It was 20 minutes past 11 when I turned the key in the front door of the brownstone and let myself in. The air had that December bite to it, the kind that wraps around your coat collar and asks why you bothered with a hat. I stepped into the vestibule, shaking the cold from my shoulders, and that's when I saw her. She was seated 2 steps up on the staircase, still, silent, dressed in black, with a veil that didn't try to hide much. Her gloved hands were folded in her lap. She didn't flinch when I closed the door behind me, nor when I hung my hat on the rack. Just watched me with the faintest trace of something that might have been grief, or might have been calculation. I took a few steps toward her, slow and careful, like approaching a stray cat that might bolt. "Evening," I said. "You seem to have taken a liking to our stairs." Her voice was low. "I need to speak to Mr. Wolfe." I glanced at the clock over the umbrella stand. "That's an eccentric request for this hour." She didn't move. "It can't wait." I sighed, leaned against the wall and took a good look. She was maybe mid-30s, sharp cheekbones under the veil, lips painted dark but not fresh. The black dress was creased like she'd worn it too long. There was no coat, no handbag, just the woman, the silence, and the staircase. "Let's say I take the message up," I offered. "You want to tell me your name?" She didn't hesitate. "Vivian McVey." The name brought me up short. I'd seen it in the papers 3 weeks ago. Husband fell from the 15th floor of the Gotham Imperial. No witnesses, no suspects. Just one very dead financier and a couple of politely vague obituaries. I straightened. "McVey, as in Jonas McVey?" "Yes." Her eyes met mine. "I'm his widow." I whistled under my breath. Wolfe wouldn't like this. He liked his clients scheduled and his evenings uninterrupted. He especially disliked stairs being used as furniture. But the name was enough to carry weight. Jonas McVey wasn't just rich. He'd once sued Wolfe over an unpaid consultation fee. Wolfe had won, of course, but it left a scent that lingered. "All right," I said, you stay exactly where you are. Don't touch the walls, and for heaven's sake, don't pet the globe." She said nothing. I mounted the stairs and turned right for the office. Wolfe was at his desk, fingers steepled, breathing through his nose as he often did when thinking about not thinking. The lamp cast a slow amber on his yellow chair. One of his rarer orchids, a blood-coloured phalaenopsis, was perched near the edge of the table, and I made a mental note not to startle it. He opened one eye. "You're late." "I was detained. There's a widow sitting on our stairs." Both eyes opened now. "She says her name is Vivian McVey." A long pause. "You may show her in," he said, with the tone of a man who had just swallowed a lemon whole. I went back down. She was still seated, same position, as if she'd been carved there. "Mr. Wolfe will see you." She rose smoothly, not a wobble in her step. No nerves. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was that she didn't look around. Most people entering that office for the first time eye the books, the chairs, the desk, the wall with the safe. She walked straight to the red client chair, as if she'd been summoned from a dream. Wolfe didn't rise, of course not, but he did incline his head, which for him was an ovation. "Mrs. McVey," he said. She sat, folded her hands again. "You were acquainted with my husband?" she asked. "Briefly," Wolfe replied. "He refused to pay for advice. Then he sued and lost." "I'm not here about that," she said. "Well, clearly." She reached into a pocket of her dress and withdrew a folded scrap of paper. She laid it on Wolfe's desk like a dealer, placing a card. "This was in his desk. I believe it's why he died." Wolfe didn't reach for it. Instead, he let me unfold it. It was a torn ledger page, handwritten, a matrix of numbers, some circled, some marked with X's, symbols in the margins, triangles, X's, dots. It meant nothing to me except that it had been folded and unfolded more than once. "And why do you believe your husband was murdered?" Wolfe asked. He told me 3 days before his fall that he had enemies. Wolfe frowned. "Everyone has enemies." He said, specifically, someone was following him, that he had to clean the books, that he had to disappear. "Disappear?" Wolfe echoed. "But he fell from a balcony." She nodded once. "I don't believe he meant to fall." Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "You think he was pushed?" "Yes. And this page is your evidence?"
"No," she said. "That's my bait."
There was a beat of silence. Wolfe leaned forward. "Explain." Her voice didn't change. "2 nights ago, someone broke into the apartment. They didn't take anything, just opened drawers. I had already hidden that page in my coat lining. The next day, someone followed me from my building to the corner store. A man in a brown coat, thick glasses. He didn't speak. He didn't come closer. But he was waiting when I left." "You're certain?"
"I walked 2 blocks. He walked behind me. When I stopped, he stopped."
Wolfe exhaled. "And what do you believe this paper is?" "I think it's part of a ledger. Jonas's private one. The part nobody was meant to see." He glanced at me. "Archie?" "I can check," I said, "but we're short on facts and long on theory." Vivian McVey didn't flinch. "You can check," she said, "but someone else is checking too, and they have fewer rules." Wolfe reached for a pen and clicked it once. "What is it you wish of me, madam?" She looked at him, not coy, not pleading, just calm. "I want you to find out who killed my husband and why." Wolfe closed his eyes, then opened them again.
"Very well."
Wolfe tapped his pen against the blotter once, lightly, then set it down. "Before I accept," he said, "I must know the terms." Vivian McVey didn't hesitate. 50,000. Half now, half upon resolution. That earned a subtle tilt of Wolfe's head, not at the amount, but at the confidence behind it. She hadn't asked for his fee, she'd dictated it. "And if resolution proves unsatisfactory to you," he asked, "you'll still have earned it." Wolfe grunted.
I leaned against the edge of the desk, arms folded. "That's a generous retainer for a theory."
She looked at me. "I'm not paying for a theory. I'm paying for certainty." Wolfe turned to me. "Archie, take down the essentials." I fetched a notepad and moved to the red armchair near the corner. Wolfe adjusted his weight, letting the springs in his chair groan. "Name, address, and details of recent contact," he instructed. Vivian gave a Park Avenue address, 8th floor, with a concierge who would verify her residence but little else. She had no maid, no chauffeur, no visible staff. That was odd, for a financier's widow in that district. "And your husband's affairs?" Wolfe asked. "Were you involved?" "No," she said. "He didn't trust me with numbers." "But he trusted you with paper trails." "I never said that." Wolfe narrowed his eyes. "Yet you possess this fragment." "I found it by accident." "In the desk?" "No," she said. "In the lining of his smoking jacket, one he hadn't worn in months."
That landed.
Wolfe's fingers curled inward, the way they do when an inconsistency appears. He intended to hide it, Wolfe mused, but never returned for it.
She nodded.
Or never had the chance.
I scribbled a note, careful to keep my breathing even. This woman wasn't breaking. She wasn't acting. She believed every word she said, or had convinced herself well enough.
"Mr. Krupke," Wolfe said suddenly. Vivian looked puzzled. "I'm sorry?" "Jonas McVey's secretary, Nolan Krupke, employed over 10 years. He typed every official and unofficial memo McVey ever dictated." "I don't know him," she said. "You never met your husband's secretary?" "No."
Wolfe leaned back. Odd.
Vivian raised an eyebrow. My husband liked compartments, she said. His life was full of them.
That I believed.
Wolfe pressed the tips of his fingers together. Very well, he said. I accept your commission. Her chin lifted slightly. Wolfe reached for the bell on the edge of the desk. It was a small bronze thing, shaped like a daffodil. Fritz will escort you to the door, he said. I stood. No, Vivian said softly. Let Archie. Wolfe didn't move. As you wish. I opened the door and motioned her out. She rose without a word and followed me to the vestibule. The hallway was quiet, lamplight pressing shadows against the walls. At the door she paused. There's something else. I waited.
That man who followed me. I saw him again.
When? Tonight, before I came here.
Where?
Across the street from your brownstone, under the lamp-post. I opened the door a fraction and looked out. Rain had started again, hissing on the sidewalk. The street was empty. I don't see anyone, I said. You wouldn't, she replied. He's not the type who lingers once lights come on. I nodded. Next time, point him out. We'll ask him in for cocoa. Her lips turned up, just barely. Thank you. I held the door as she stepped out into the cold. She walked with purpose, no hesitation. I waited until she vanished down the block, then closed the door behind her and slid the bolt. Back upstairs, Wolfe hadn't moved. His eyes were closed, hands still folded. She's lying, he said. I dropped into my chair. About which part? She knew Krupke. I frowned. You're sure? No one lives with a man 5 years and doesn't know his secretary, unless she was kept away deliberately. She said he lived in compartments.
Indeed.
He opened his eyes. But the ledger fragment is real. I reached into my pocket and unfolded the page again. It's not a code I recognize, I said. It's not for you to recognize, he said. It's for Krupke. So we start there. Wolfe nodded. Locate him. Observe. Do not engage. He shifted in his chair and reached for a different orchid, a white dendrobium. Also, he said, find out who was standing beneath our lamppost. I stood.
That might take time. Wolfe smiled faintly.
Then begin at once. The next morning was grey enough to pass for morning clothes. It suited the mood, and it suited the woman. Vivian McVey arrived precisely at 10. I met her at the door, as always, since Fritz didn't answer it and Wolfe never would. She wore the same black, this time with a small velvet hat pinned neatly to her curls. Her gloves were soft kid leather. No visible jewellery, only her gaze, just as quiet and unreadable as the night before. Mr. Wolfe is expecting you, I said. She nodded once and stepped inside. Her heels made no sound on the tiles. Some people fill space. She seemed to reduce it. I led her into the office. Wolfe was already in position, centred in the yellow chair, a half-drained glass of beer on the side table, and the morning paper neatly folded on his lap. He didn't stand. She took the red client chair without being invited. That earned a slight twitch from Wolfe's eyebrow. I took my place by the bookcase, pad in hand. Mrs. McVey, Wolfe said, let us begin. She reached into her handbag, drew out a folded page, and laid it on the desk. I believe this is what they were looking for, she said. Wolfe didn't touch it. He gave me a nod. I stepped forward, unfolded it carefully. It was the same page from the night before, but now in full view. The tear ran jagged across the bottom, the paper thick, cream-coloured, and faintly scented with tobacco and thyme. The contents were a mess. Figures, notations, some underlined, others circled, symbols that looked like they came from a surveyor's handbook. Wolfe glanced once, then turned back to her. You found this in his jacket? Yes. When? A week after the funeral, I was packing his things. You recognized it as a ledger? I recognized it as something he would never have left lying around. Wolfe tilted his head. Yet he did. She folded her hands. No, he hid it. The jacket was from last winter, and he hadn't worn it in months. I set the page down beside the beer glass. Who else knows you have this? Wolfe asked.
No one.
Not even the police? I never went to the police. Why not? Because they decided it was an accident before I had the chance. Wolfe made a noise like a chair shifting on carpet. It might have been agreement. You believe otherwise?
Yes, she said. I believe he was pushed.
Wolfe leaned back slightly, fingers meeting at the tips. Let us discuss the man, then. She blinked once. My husband? Yes, Jonas McVey. You've told us nothing of substance.
She didn't protest, just breathed once through her nose and began.
He was private, brilliant with money, cold with people. He built walls around himself, even in marriage. How long were you married? 5 years? Any children? No.
Where did you meet?
At a fundraising gala. He was a sponsor. I was... Scenery. That was unexpected. She said it without flinching. I take it he offered more than compliments. He offered a check for the charity and a dinner invitation. Was he married at the time?
She looked directly at Wolfe. No, at least not that I knew.
Wolfe didn't reply. That would be a question for later. Who benefits from his death? She lifted a shoulder. Officially, me. Unofficially? She hesitated, then spoke low.
I think Jonas was involved in something bigger than himself. Something dangerous.
And the page proves this? I think the page proves he was trying to hide something. I think the rest of it is still out there. Wolfe gestured toward the desk. This is not a full ledger. No, she said, just a fragment. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. And you believe this fragment is enough to kill for? I believe someone already has. He opened his eyes. So you've said, but conviction is not evidence. Her voice stayed level.
Then find it.
He stared at her, then glanced at me. I didn't speak. This was Wolfe's play now. You mentioned a man in a brown coat. She nodded. He followed me twice.
You never spoke to him?
No. Did he threaten you? Not directly.
Then why come here? Because Jonas mentioned cleaning the books. Because someone searched the apartment. Because that man watched me from the lamppost. Because I'm not safe, and I know it. Wolfe looked away, toward the bookshelves. You might be mistaken.
I might be, but you're not.
That earned her something rare, a flicker of approval. Wolfe didn't like bravado, but he respected precision.
He looked back. Very well, he said. My fee is $50,000. 25 now, the rest upon resolution.
Done.
I do not guarantee a result. I guarantee only effort. I know. He gave a final nod. Archie will draw up the contract. I moved to the desk drawer and pulled out a clean agreement sheet. I wrote in the details by hand. Name, date, scope. She signed it without reading twice. Her signature was elegant, but firm. A widow's hand, but not a grieving one. As I folded the paper, Wolfe tapped his glass. I have one more question. She looked up. Did your husband keep a separate office? Yes, on Madison near 49th. Keys? I have them. Bring them. I'll send someone. I will. She stood, smoothed her skirt.
Wolfe rose precisely 1 inch from the back of his chair, just enough to indicate the meeting was done.
Mrs. McVey, he said. She met his gaze. I'll expect to hear from you. Vivian McVey departed the brownstone the way she had entered it, without noise or apology. I watched her cross the sidewalk through the front window. The mist softened her silhouette. When she disappeared into a waiting cab, I shut the blinds. Wolfe hadn't moved. His hands were still laced across his midsection. He didn't speak until I was seated again. "Well?" "I've seen better liars," I said, "but she's not one of them." "She believes what she's saying," Wolfe agreed. "The difficulty lies in whether she's right." I glanced at the fragment still resting beside his beer glass. "It's not standard accounting." "No, but it is structured." "Coded?" "Possibly. Certainly selective." I leaned forward, tapping the page gently. "So what now?" Wolfe exhaled through his nose. "You'll visit Jonas McVey's office. Use the keys. Take care not to be noticed." "You think someone's watching it?" "If someone entered the apartment to search it, the office would be next. Perhaps already has been." I pocketed the keys. "And Krupke?" "Track him. Learn his habits. Observe. Don't confront."
Understood.
Wolfe stood, reached for the bell, then thought better of it. "I'll inform Fritz. We'll dine on time tonight."
Duck or lamb?
"Neither," he said. "Something forgettable."
I rose and headed for the hall, then paused at the door.
"You believe her?" He didn't answer at once. "I believe she's afraid." I nodded and went to fetch my coat. The McVey offices were 2 flights above a jewelry store with a frosted glass door that read McVey Holdings Limited in gold serif. The hallway smelled of polish and time. I checked the corridor, empty, and used the smaller of the 2 keys. The lock turned with a soft click. Inside, the air was stale. No sign of dust, but no sign of recent activity either. The carpets were deep blue, the furniture modern in a 1937 way. The desk was locked. I tried the 2nd key. No luck. I stepped back, surveyed. Filing cabinets to the left, shelves to the right, a coffee service untouched on a silver tray. Nothing had been moved recently, except
The rug.
one edge near the bookshelf had been nudged just an inch off the line. I crouched, lifted the edge. A floorboard was loose. Beneath it, empty space. And tucked inside, a manila envelope. Thick. I didn't touch it. Instead, I pulled on gloves and slid it into my briefcase without opening it. I scanned the room again, locked everything as I had found it, and left. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was with the orchids. I waited until 4 o'clock, then carried the envelope into the office and laid it on the desk. He returned at 4:15, as always. He glanced once at the envelope, then sat. "Unopened?" "As requested." "Good." He drew a small knife from the drawer and slit the flap. Inside were 8 more ledger pages, torn edges, matching symbols. He spent the next 10 minutes reading in silence. I let the ticking of the wall clock do the talking. At last, he placed the pages down and reached for his beer. "It's a shell game," he said. "Elaborate. Real estate. Money moved from one property to another, on paper only, properties that don't exist. Classic fraud?" "No," he said. "This is concealment, not theft. Someone was trying to bury assets, not embezzle." "Jonas?" "Possibly, or someone close to him."
Vivian?
He shook his head. "Too clean. She said she wasn't involved. She said Jonas didn't trust her with numbers." "Then who?" He gave me a look.
Find Krupke. Tonight.
By 7, I had tracked Nolan Krupke to a midtown apartment, 5th floor, rear window, no curtains. He came home at 7:20, carrying a newspaper and 2 apples, 40-ish, thin, nervous around locks. I gave him an hour, then made the call. "Archie," Wolfe said, "observe him for 3 days. Record who he meets, what he carries, and whether he looks over his shoulder. And if he talks to anyone, note it. Do not interfere." I hung up and settled in for a long evening. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe reviewed the ledgers again. He used a pencil, not for notes, but to follow the lines of numbers as if they were paths through a maze. Fritz brought in a light supper, spinach souffle and cold trout, and placed it silently by his elbow. At 9:30, Wolfe rang the bell.
I re-entered.
"The man following Vivian," he said. "Yes? Has he been seen again?"
Not yet. He exists, but he's not a thug. No?
"No," Wolfe said. "He's a collector, someone who thinks ahead. He wants something, likely the same thing we now possess." "The ledger?" "Yes." I crossed to the fireplace and leaned against the mantel. "Think he knows we have it?" "He will soon." Wolfe closed the folder and tapped it once. "Have Mr. Kramer notified. We may need him before long." "You expect a murder?" "I expect ambition, the same thing that built Jonas McVey's fortune." "And destroyed it?" Wolfe's eyes closed briefly. "We shall see." The McVey penthouse rose over Fifth like a cold shoulder. I rang twice. A long pause. Then the door opened, wide enough for one eye and half a frown. The girl behind it looked about 22, maybe 23. Burnt sienna hair, tied in a way that said she hadn't meant to answer the door. Freckles, sharp chin. Wearing a cardigan too large and a scowl too practiced. "Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin. I'm here to ask about Jonas McVey." Her expression didn't shift. "He's dead."
So I heard. You must be Delia.
That won me a raised eyebrow, but no correction. "Your stepmother said I might drop by."
She would.
I waited. She didn't open the door any wider.
She also said you'd be helpful.
That did the trick. She opened just enough for me to cross the threshold. The penthouse inside was cream and walnut, and expensive in the quiet way. Tasteful rugs, sculpted glass, no clutter. A place made for money to be counted in. Delia crossed to the sofa without offering me a seat. I made myself at home anyway. "She didn't kill him, if that's what you're asking." I hadn't yet.
Well, don't bother.
I studied her for a beat. "You don't sound heartbroken." She picked up a book and flipped it closed without marking the page. "He was my father, not a friend." "What kind of man was he?" She leaned back. "Distant, exacting, generous when it made him look good."
And with Vivian?
She snorted. "He adored her, until he didn't." "What changed?" "Nothing. That was the problem. Jonas liked novelty. Vivian aged." "And you think he took a fall because of that?" "No," she said. "I think he stood too close to the edge." I watched her. She watched back. "You really believe it was suicide?" Her voice lowered. "I think Jonas lost something big, and when that happens to men like him, they jump." "What do you think he lost?" "I don't know, but he started talking in riddles, said he had to clean house, asked me if I still had a passport." "When was this?" 2 nights before he died."
I made a note. Did he seem scared?
"No," she said. He seemed embarrassed."
A new silence settled.
She broke it with a shrug. "You're wasting your time, you know. Vivian wants this to be a story. It isn't."
I like stories, I said, and yours is a start. She stood. "The study's that way. If you're going to dig, you might as well start with the desk."
She pointed toward a set of double glass doors. I rose and nodded once. "Thank you." She didn't reply. The study was darker than the rest of the apartment. Curtains half drawn, a layer of dust on the lamp base. Jonas McVey's desk was a broad walnut affair, cleared with the kind of precision only secretaries or grief manage. The blotter was bare, the pens aligned. The top drawer held envelopes, unused. The second drawer had staples, a stapler, and a single burned match. Interesting, the bottom drawer stuck. I knelt, gave it a tug. Something shifted. I tried again. slow and steady. It opened halfway. Inside, a black leather folder with one edge scorched, curled like the corner of toast. The smell of ash lingered. I slipped on gloves, reached in, and pulled the thing free. Most of the pages inside were blank, a few were stained, but one near the middle held more of the same notations from Vivian's fragment. Numbers, symbols, a triangle beside a dollar sign. I eased it out and folded it once, cleanly, before slipping it into the inner pocket of my coat. The desk yielded nothing else. No names, no memos, no letter of farewell. I stood, straightened my tie, and made for the living room. Delia was by the fireplace now, staring at the flames. "Did your father keep a ledger?" She didn't look at me. "He kept dozens, but not at home." "Where?"
"His office, Madison and 49th. I've seen it."
"Then you've seen more than I have. I wasn't allowed past the lobby."
"Odd."
She smiled. "He was a man of compartments." "So I've heard." I paused by the doorway.
"Tell me something. What do you think he was hiding?"
She turned. "Regret." I let that hang, then tipped my hat. "Thank you, Miss McVey." The door shut behind me with a sound like punctuation. Back on the sidewalk, I waited 5 paces before turning and scanning the block. No man in a brown coat, no one obvious, but the air felt watched. I buttoned my coat, turned east, and walked back toward the brownstone, the folded page tapping softly against my chest with each step. By the time I reached the brownstone, the sky had turned the color of an old nickel. Fritz opened the kitchen door at my knock. I nodded once and passed through without a word. Fritz didn't ask for one. Wolfe was already in the office, seated in the yellow chair, a copy of the New York Times folded across his knee. The beer was untouched. I set my hat on the rack and laid the blackened ledger page on the edge of his desk. He looked up, frowned faintly, and reached with 2 fingers. The charred edge flaked a little under his grip. "Explain." "Found it in McVey's home office, Mamma," I said. "Bottom drawer, half stuck. The whole folder smelled like a campfire." "He attempted to destroy it." "Or someone else did." Wolfe unfolded it fully. It matches the previous page. Same ink, same hand, same jungle of symbols. He turned it toward the light. Triangle beside the dollar sign again. I moved to the sideboard and poured myself a glass of water. I spoke with Delia. "Intelligent? Sharp. Doesn't cry about her father." "Does she suspect Vivian?" "She suspects everybody, but she claims Jonas was depressed, talked about passports, embarrassed about something." Wolfe grunted. "He had shame?"
"She says so."
Wolfe studied the page for another moment, then set it aside with a sigh. "She is wrong."
"About what?"
"About it not being a story." I waited. He was attempting to erase something. That is not despair, it is panic.
"Then Vivian was right."
"Perhaps," Wolfe allowed, "but Delia gives us the motive." He tapped the paper. "Fear." I took a seat.
"She says he spoke in riddles."
"Men who lie often do," Wolfe murmured. I leaned back, folded my hands. "I also spoke to Krupke." Wolfe's head turned slightly. "When?" "This morning, briefly."
"And?" "He was polite, but nervous. Said he had no comment. Seemed surprised I found him." "Did he admit knowledge of the ledgers?"
"Denied everything."
Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Yet he let you in."
"Only the foyer, but he didn't close the door." "That's something. He looked like a man who sleeps in his shoes." Wolfe picked up his beer, took a slow sip. "Then he is afraid as well." We let that settle between us. Outside, a car passed slowly, tires whispering on wet pavement. "I think McVey was trying to disappear," I said. "Maybe not from Vivian, maybe not even from the law. Just vanish." "Impossible," Wolfe said. Men like him leave shadows. He set the beer down. I want everything Delia has ever signed. Legal documents, school records, letters, inheritance papers. You think she's involved? I think she knows more than she's said. I want confirmation. I made a note. Also, Wolfe said, dig deeper into Krupke, financials, travel, see if he booked passage anywhere. Rail, bus, air. You expect him to run? I expect him to decide whether loyalty is still worth the cost. I stood. Wolfe turned the page once more, then pushed it aside. The fire was rushed, sloppy. Why not just burn the whole folder? Perhaps he was interrupted, or changed his mind. Wolfe didn't reply. I crossed to the door.
Oh, and one other thing, I said.
Yes? Delia said something strange. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. She said Jonas kept her out of his office, refused to let her pass the lobby. That is not strange. It is when he trusted her enough to leave her the spare apartment key.
Wolfe's eyes glinted.
Well, well, he said.
I reached for my coat.
I'll bring back what I can. He nodded once.
And Archie? Yes?
Be careful where you ask. That evening, I telephoned Kramer from the hall phone. Inspector, I said, if Jonas McVey's ledgers start showing up in pieces, what do you suppose they'll say? Are you giving me something? Not yet.
What's the pitch?
No pitch, I said. Just a breeze. Thought you'd want to know which way it's blowing. Kramer grunted. Where'd the wind start?
In McVey's desk.
That ledger in the fire. Parts of it survived. Silence. Keep me posted, he said, and hung up. Back in the office, Wolfe had opened a second beer. He glanced up as I entered. Krupa's name was on a shipping manifest 2 weeks ago, I said. Passenger line to Havana, cancelled last minute. Wolfe smiled. And Delia? She signed nothing after 1947, not even the estate declaration. She declined her inheritance? No, she never filed for it. Wolfe closed his eyes. The compartments again. He opened them. We must find the seam. The rain had eased into a soft mist by the time I reached the East River flats. The address Wolfe gave me was scrawled on a matchbook, courtesy of Saul Panzer, who had run a background check that morning so fast I'd swear he'd bribed the Census Bureau. The building at 217 Rivington wasn't the sort of place you find in glossy magazines. Peeling paint, stairs that whined like they hadn't been greased since Prohibition. The smell of boiled cabbage floated up from somewhere undefined, permanent as wallpaper.
I climbed to the 3rd floor, found apartment 3C, and knocked.
Footsteps. Careful, not slow, just deliberate. The door opened an inch. Yes?
The voice was low and dry. No accent, no nerves, just age and something heavier.
Mrs. Quinn? I asked. Lenore Quinn? She studied me through the crack. Eyes grey, framed by faint lines and a faded face that hadn't forgotten how to frown. I was told never to answer to that name again. I tipped my hat. Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. A long pause. Then, the Orchid Man. I smiled. Among other things. Another pause. Then the door opened fully. She turned without waiting for me and walked back toward a cramped sitting room. I followed. The place was dim, furnished with a mismatched sofa and a low lamp that cast everything in shades of amber and regret. No husband, no children's photos, just a wall clock ticking in the silence and a dish of hard candy on the sideboard. She lowered herself into a chair. You're here about Jonas? Yes. I won't pretend to be surprised. I hear you were married. We were. 10 years.
You divorced?
She looked at me, still and steady. No. That caught me. I sat down across from her. So you were never legally separated? No. He walked out one afternoon and never returned. I got a letter a week later. One sentence. This is finished. No contact since. I saw his name in the papers. That was enough. You didn't contest the remarriage? She gave a brittle laugh. Contest? That would have cost money, and shame, and lawyers who ask if I cook too much or too little. But he remarried? Yes. He remarried, she said, the words like gravel. With no annulment, no papers, just a new ring and a new story. And you let it go?
What would you have done? I didn't answer that.
Instead I asked, what do you want?
Nothing, she said, except the truth.
I leaned forward slightly.
Why now?
Her fingers tightened around the armrest. Because I saw her.
Vivian?
Yes. When? The night before the fall.
You're sure?
She was wearing a red scarf and sunglasses indoors. She entered the Gotham Imperial through the side entrance. Did she see you? No, I was across the street. Why were you there?
I followed Jonas. I'd been following him for days. I knew where he stayed. I wanted to see him with my own eyes.
Did you speak to him? No. You watched him?
I watched them both. And the next morning...
He was dead. I kept my voice steady.
You understand this changes the timeline.
She looked away. I didn't come forward because I thought maybe he really had jumped. Maybe he couldn't bear the lie anymore.
You believe that?
No, she said. I believe she pushed him. I waited. She had the most to gain.
I glanced at the room again. The chipped mantle. The worn rug. The absence of everything money buys. And you?
She smiled, thin and without joy. I had the most to lose, but that doesn't count for much when you've already lost it. I stood.
Would you speak to the police?
No. To Wolfe? She nodded. If he'll listen. I offered a card. She didn't take it. I'll find him, she said, when I'm ready. I reached the door, then turned. Why tell me now? Her voice was quiet. Because I want her to be afraid. I left the building with her words in my pocket and the smell of mothballs on my coat. The street had emptied out. A boy pushed a cart of newspapers toward the corner. A dog barked once and gave up. The East River whispered behind me like a secret kept too long. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was having his evening beer. The orchids had been misted and the shutters were drawn. He was in his yellow chair, eyes on the ceiling. I placed my hat on the peg and the rain from my coat into the umbrella stand. She's alive, I said, and she's not happy. Wolfe's gaze didn't lower. Lenore Quinn. Formerly McVey. Emphatically, not former, depending on your definition. She insists there was no divorce. She does. He turned his head slowly. Documentation? None. He walked out and left her with a one-line letter, no decree, no notice, just vanished. She believed him dead?
No, she believed him finished. Wolfe's lips parted, not quite a smile. Ah.
She saw Vivian, I said, at the hotel the night before Jonas died. Now he looked at me fully. She claims that?
She swears to it. Red scarf, sunglasses, side entrance.
Did she confront them? No, she watched from across the street. He tapped the armrest twice. Why speak now? She wants the widow to be afraid. Does she expect money? She expects justice. Wolfe grunted. A less reliable currency. I sat. She says Jonas swindled her, left her with nothing. Wolfe raised a hand. He left her with something, a motive. She didn't push him. Perhaps not, but she cracked the timeline.
Yes.
He closed his eyes. If Vivian was with Jonas the night before the fall, then her story is false. and the death may not be. Wolfe nodded once. I want Saul on Lenore. I want Fred on the hotel entrance records. I want the bellman, the elevator boy, the chambermaid. Find the time of the visit. I jotted notes. Where's Krupke? Hiding. He must be flushed. Wolfe leaned forward.
Find the man in the brown coat.
I frowned. Still no sightings. You're not looking hard enough. Delia?
She stays where she is. She's not ready.
And Vivian? She'll come to us, Wolfe said. How do you know? He smiled faintly. Because the second widow always knocks twice. The knock came the next morning. 3 sharp raps, then silence. I opened the door. Vivian stood there, no veil today, coat buttoned to the chin, eyes wide but dry. Come in, I said. She stepped past, without a word. Wolfe was already in the office, seated. Vivian entered, stood, and didn't sit. I was followed. Wolfe inclined his head. Describe him. Tall, brown coat, heavy glasses, black shoes. He ducked into a tobacconist when I turned. Goodwin will pursue him. She glanced at me. I nodded once. There's more, she said. Continue, Wolfe said. I found this, last night, in a drawer Jonas never used. She held out a folded envelope. I took it, opened it. Inside, a check stub. Made out to Lenore Quinn. $15,000, dated 1 week before the fall. Explain, Wolfe said. I don't know, she said. He never mentioned her.
Yet he paid her.
Yes. Wolfe gestured for the stub. I passed it over. He studied it, then set it beside his beer. You lied, he said. Vivian blinked.
You said you knew nothing about Lenore, but you've known her name.
No.
Lies waste time, madam, yours and mine. She faltered.
I found her name on a letterhead, she said, months ago. In a locked box. I asked Jonas. He said it was nothing. And you accepted that? I wanted to. Why? Because the alternative was worse.
Silence.
Then Wolfe said quietly, he was still married. She nodded once. I know that now. He closed his eyes. And what else? She opened her handbag, took out a photograph, laid it on the desk. Jonas, Vivian, a beach, smiling, on the back, Atlantic City, August. Wolfe turned it over. This was after the date of death. Yes, she said, which means he didn't die that day. She said nothing.
Wolfe opened his eyes.
I will find the rest, he said. Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. Please do. The rain had given way to fog. It hovered in the street like cigarette smoke, with nowhere to rise. Inside the brownstone, things were quiet. Too quiet, in my professional opinion. Fritz had vanished to the kitchen. Wolfe was with his orchids. And I was just starting to think I might read the rest of the newspaper uninterrupted. Then came the knock. Not Fritz's knock, not Saul's, not a delivery boy with bad posture and worse diction. No, this knock had teeth. I crossed the hallway, opened the door. There he was. Inspector Kramer. No hat, coat collar high, eyes like polished brass, and a cigar clenched between 2 fingers with the sort of authority they never teach at police academy. I didn't bother smiling. Good morning, Inspector.
Where is he?
Still where we left him last night. Try the orchids. I'm not in the mood. Then I suggest you adjust. He pushed past me without another word. I let the door close behind him and followed him into the office, where Wolfe was now seated in the yellow chair, a fresh beer beside him, and no visible surprise on his face. Inspector, he said, I ought to put you on the list. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. What list is that? The one where people connected to Jonas McVey end up dead. I moved to my usual post. Wolfe tapped a finger, once against the armrest. You better sit. Kramer didn't. He planted his feet and stared. A man named Richard Campo was found dead last night. Bellhop, Gotham Imperial. Wolfe waited. Poisoned? Kramer said. Cyanide in a flask? Unfortunate.
His notepad had a name scrawled on it.
Wolfe sighed. Yes?
Vivian M.
That landed.
Wolfe steepled his fingers. You think the widow killed a bellboy?
I think you've got your sleeves rolled in something filthy, and you'd better unroll fast. I cleared my throat. Richard Campo was at the Gotham the night of the fall? Yes. And you think he saw something? We think he knew something. Wolfe closed his eyes. And the name?
Written badly, shaky, probably before the poison took full hold.
I crossed my arms. What would she gain? Maybe he was blackmailing her. Maybe he knew she was there. Maybe he saw her push.
Wolfe's eyes opened.
Or maybe he thought scribbling her name would make someone sweat. Kramer turned to me. What does she want? You'll have to ask her. I will. She's not here, Wolfe said. No, Kramer replied, but you are, and you're in it deep. Wolfe sat forward half an inch. I am not in it at all, Inspector. You came to me. Kramer pulled out a small notebook. You're not talking. I am declining to speculate. Fine, Kramer said, but I want your word. If she contacts you, you'll be the first to know, Wolfe said. Kramer didn't thank him. He turned, looked at the room like it had personally offended him, and started for the door. He paused in the vestibule. You're protecting a black widow. Wolfe didn't answer. The door shut behind Kramer like a courtroom gavel. The rain had given way to fog. It hovered in the street like cigarette smoke with nowhere to rise. Inside the brownstone, things were quiet. Too quiet, in my professional opinion. Fritz had vanished to the kitchen. Wolfe was with his orchids. And I was just starting to think I might read the rest of the newspaper uninterrupted. Then came the knock. Not Fritz's knock, not Saul's, not a delivery boy with bad posture and worse diction. No, this knock had teeth.
I crossed the hallway, opened the door.
There he was. Inspector Kramer. No hat. Coat collar high. Eyes like polished brass. And a cigar clenched between two fingers with the sort of authority they never teach at police academy. I didn't bother smiling. Good morning, Inspector. Where is he? Still where we left him last night. Try the orchids. I'm not in the mood. Then I suggest you adjust. He pushed past me without another word. I let the door close behind him and followed him into the office, where Wolfe was now seated in the yellow chair, a fresh beer beside him, and no visible surprise on his face. Inspector, he said, I ought to put you on the list. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. What list is that? The one where people connected to Jonas McVey end up dead. I moved to my usual post. Wolfe tapped a finger, once against the armrest. You'd better sit. Kramer didn't. He planted his feet and stared. A man named Richard Campo was found dead last night. Bellhop, Gotham Imperial. Wolfe waited. Poisoned, Kramer said. Cyanide in a flask. Unfortunate.
His notepad had a name scrawled on it.
Wolfe sighed. Yes?
Vivian M.
That landed.
Wolfe steepled his fingers. You think the widow killed a bellboy?
I think you've got your sleeves rolled in something filthy, and you'd better unroll fast. I cleared my throat. Richard Campo was at the Gotham the night of the fall. Yes. And you think he saw something? We think he knew something.
Wolfe closed his eyes.
And the name? Written badly, shaky, probably before the poison took full hold. I crossed my arms. What would she gain?
Maybe he was blackmailing her. Maybe he knew she was there. Maybe he saw her push.
Wolfe's eyes opened. Or maybe he thought scribbling her name would make someone sweat. Kramer turned to me. What does she want? You'll have to ask her. I will.
She's not here, Wolfe said.
No, Kramer replied, but you are, and you're in it deep. Wolfe sat forward half an inch. I am not in it at all, Inspector. You came to me. Kramer pulled out a small notebook. You're not talking? I am declining to speculate. Fine, Kramer said, but I want your word. If she contacts you, you'll be the first to know, Wolfe said.
Kramer didn't thank him. He turned, looked at the room like it had personally offended him, and started for the door.
He paused in the vestibule. You're protecting a black widow. Wolfe didn't answer. The door shut behind Kramer like a courtroom gavel. The door had barely settled before Wolfe muttered, intemperate as ever. I returned to the office and crossed to the window, watching the fog roll down 35th like a curtain in a slow play. He's not wrong, I said. Wolfe didn't reply. He's got a corpse, a name on a pad, and a widow in black who hasn't told us everything. She's told us enough, Wolfe said, without conviction. Enough for what? To know someone wanted silence. Campo? Wolfe nodded once. If he saw her enter the hotel, she becomes an alibi, or a suspect, depending on which night. Precisely. I paced slowly, eyes on the carpet. He had a flask, cyanide, could have been slipped. Or chosen? You think he poisoned himself? No, Wolfe said, but someone may have convinced him it was wiser than the alternative. I stopped.
That's quite a suggestion.
Wolfe lifted his glass. This entire affair is a suggestion. I let that sit. Do we tell her? Not yet. She's in danger. Possibly.
From who? Whoever left the cufflink, Wolfe said. That took a second to land.
You think that was a warning? Wolfe nodded. And not to us?
I moved to the desk, picked up the check stub. Lenore Quinn's name. The amount. The date.
Lenore didn't know about this? She lied. Why? To keep us focused on Vivian. I raised an eyebrow. You think Lenore had Campo killed? No, Wolfe said, but she's part of the noise. I looked over at him. You're chasing signal. Always. A knock on the kitchen door interrupted us. Light. Rapid. Fritz's voice drifted in. Archie? I stepped out, found Fritz holding a pale yellow envelope. No return address, no stamp. This was at the door, he said. I took it and thanked him. Back in the office, Wolfe hadn't moved. I handed it over. He opened it delicately.
Inside, one sheet, typed. No salutation.
Tell Wolfe to back off. You don't want what's coming next. No signature. Wolfe read it twice, then passed it to me. I whistled. You think it's a bluff? No, Wolfe said. I think it's an invitation. To what? He looked at me, slow and cold. To dinner. Krupke didn't look like the type to enjoy a steakhouse. But at 6:30, there he was, tucked into a red leather booth at a place called Tillery's, slicing into a porterhouse like he'd just discovered appetite. I was 2 tables over, bourbon in front of me, untouched. He wasn't alone. The other man had the kind of face lawyers develop after 20 years of billing by the quarter hour. Thin-lipped, crisp part in the hair, eyes like a money clip, tight and metallic. I'd seen him once before, from a distance. Marvin Ebner, real estate specialist with an office that specialized in things no one wanted listed in directories. Their conversation was muted, mostly murmurs between bites. I caught phrases, holding company, Sunrise Industrial. And once, Jonas was careful, but not careful enough. Ebner passed something across the table, a folded document. Krupke slipped it into his coat without looking. Then, quite casually, Ebner said, "The other page is still missing." Krupke leaned back. "I don't have it." Ebner's fork paused mid-air. "Then find it, before someone else does." 10 minutes later, they left separately. I waited, paid, and walked out through the side. Krupke headed south on Lexington, then disappeared into the crowd. I didn't follow. I had what I needed. The shell companies were real. Jonas McVey hadn't just shuffled money, he'd buried it. Back at the brownstone, the fog had returned, thicker now, hushing the street, the kind of night where footsteps vanish quickly and strangers don't linger. I mounted the steps, key in hand, when I spotted it. A pale yellow envelope sitting square on the welcome mat. No postage, no handwriting, just thick, folded paper, sealed with glue that had darkened at the corners. I picked it up and felt weight inside. In the vestibule, I waited under the hallway light, then peeled it open carefully. Inside, one item, a cufflink, gold, bloodstained, and monogrammed J.M. I stepped into the office and laid the envelope on Wolfe's desk without a word. He looked up from the New York Telegram, registered my expression, and set the paper down. He opened the envelope, withdrew the cufflink, and held it in 2 fingers. The monogram faced him. The smear of blood was still wet. He set it on the desk. Where? Doormat. Time? 10 minutes ago.
Was it visible from the street? Yes. Anyone nearby?
No. He reached for his handkerchief, folded it, and wrapped the cufflink. Then he looked at me.
Tell me everything.
I sat. Ebner and Krupke, Tillery's on 48th, back booth. They talked real estate, shell companies. Someone else is looking for ledger pages.
Did they say who?
No, but Ebner was nervous. Krupke too, there's panic now. Jonas was laundering through fake parcels. Midtown, Brooklyn, probably elsewhere. Wolfe closed his eyes. And the cufflink? Ebner never touched his coat. Krupke had one document, nothing else. I came straight back. Then someone else left it. I nodded.
Wolfe unwrapped the handkerchief and studied the cufflink again.
Blood type? I blinked. Not visible to the naked eye. He smiled slightly. Of course. I stood.
We tell Kramer?
Not yet. He won't be pleased. He rarely is. Wolfe folded the envelope and set it on the edge of the blotter. This isn't a threat, he said.
No?
It's a signal. Someone knows we're closing in.
I crossed my arms.
You think it's Vivian?
No, Wolfe said. Vivian has too much to lose. This was left by someone with nothing left at all.
Wolfe disappeared upstairs at 9 sharp. He didn't say a word, just rose from his yellow chair, adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, and vanished toward the greenhouse. The orchids called. And when the orchids called, even murder had to wait its turn. By 10, the brownstone was so quiet you could hear Fritz sharpening a carving knife 3 rooms away. I spent the time sorting Wolfe's notes, if 3 blank sheets and a torn ledger fragment could be called notes. The cufflink remained where he'd left it, wrapped in cloth beside the blotter, like a relic at rest. At precisely 11:20, the elevator whirred softly. Wolfe returned. His hands were folded behind his back. His step was heavier than usual. He stopped at the office threshold. "Fritz," he called, "the duck l'orange." Fritz's voice answered from the kitchen. "Yes, sir." Wolfe entered, lowered himself into the yellow chair, and shut his eyes. I set down my pencil. "Duck?" I said. He didn't open his eyes. "Duck," he repeated. "With blood orange reduction, wild rice, and braised endive." "That's a special occasion meal." "It is." "Which occasion?" He opened one eye. "The one in which I've decided how Jonas McVey planned to disappear." I sat up straighter. "You've cracked it. I've threaded the beginning. The rest depends on others." He reached for the ledger fragment. The burnt page is a decoy. I frowned. He wanted it found? No, Wolfe said. He wanted it destroyed, but someone stopped him or finished the fire too late. He held the page up to the desk lamp. The scorched edge curled inward. The triangle beside the $sign, he murmured. It's a marker. For what? Property transactions. Phony, circular, money moving through companies McVey controlled but never signed for. He laundered it? No, he concealed it.
I tapped my notebook.
To what end? To vanish, wealthy, untraced. But he died. Did he? Wolfe asked.
I blinked.
Not visible to the naked eye.
He smiled slightly. Of course. I stood. We tell Kramer?
Not yet. He won't be pleased. He rarely is. Wolfe folded the envelope and set it on the edge of the blotter. This isn't a threat, he said. No? It's a signal. Someone knows we're closing in.
I crossed my arms.
You think it's Vivian?
No, Wolfe said. Vivian has too much to lose. This was left by someone with nothing left at all.
Wolfe disappeared upstairs at 9 sharp. He didn't say a word, just rose from his yellow chair, adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, and vanished toward the greenhouse. The orchids called. And when the orchids called, even murder had to wait its turn. By 10, the brownstone was so quiet you could hear Fritz sharpening a carving knife 3 rooms away. I spent the time sorting Wolfe's notes, if 3 blank sheets and a torn ledger fragment could be called notes. The cufflink remained where he'd left it, wrapped in cloth beside the blotter, like a relic at rest. At precisely 11:20, the elevator whirred softly. Wolfe returned. His hands were folded behind his back. His step was heavier than usual. He stopped at the office threshold. "Fritz," he called, "the duck l'orange." Fritz's voice answered from the kitchen. "Yes, sir." Wolfe entered, lowered himself into the yellow chair, and shut his eyes. I set down my pencil. "Duck?" I said. He didn't open his eyes. "Duck," he repeated. "With blood orange reduction, wild rice, and braised endive. That's a special occasion meal." "It is."
Which occasion?
He opened one eye. "The one in which I've decided how Jonas McVey planned to disappear." I sat up straighter.
You've cracked it?
"I've threaded the beginning. The rest depends on others." He reached for the ledger fragment. "The burnt page is a decoy." I frowned. "He wanted it found?"
No, Wolfe said. He wanted it destroyed, but someone stopped him or finished the fire too late.
He held the page up to the desk lamp. The scorched edge curled inward. "The triangle beside the $sign, he murmured. "It's a marker." For what? Property transactions. Phony, circular, money moving through companies McVey controlled but never signed for. He laundered it. No, he concealed it. I tapped my notebook.
To what end?
To vanish, wealthy, untraced. But he died. Did he? Wolfe asked. I blinked. He lowered the page. "Call Saul Panzer," he said. I reached for the phone. "Tell him to trail Vivian discreetly from dawn to dusk." "Vivian?" "She knows more than she's told us. I wish to know if she behaves accordingly." I dialed. Wolfe waited until I finished speaking to Saul, then lifted the receiver himself and pressed 2. "The kitchen line." "Fritz," he said. "Double the rice. There may be 3 for dinner."
A pause. No wine, brandy after.
He hung up, turned to me. "Now Fred Durkin. He is to observe Krupke. Starting tonight. Shifts until further notice. No contact." Done. I made the call. Fred didn't ask why. Fred never did. "And Ori?" Wolfe nodded once. "To Ebner. I want his bank, his clerk, his barber if it comes to it. I want to know who he dines with and whether his shoes are shined by hand." I scribbled, then called Orrie. Wolfe rose, paced once to the window, and stood with one hand resting on the sash. He spoke softly. The money was real. The companies were paper. The books, deliberately unbalanced. So?
So someone meant to finish the burn, but they failed.
I crossed the room. You think they were interrupted? Yes. By what?
Wolfe turned.
By the murder, or by the wrong man falling? Wolfe left the window and returned to his chair. He folded his arms and stared at the envelope that once held the blood-stained cufflink. "Archie," he said, "what is the value of a monogram?" "In this case? In any?" I considered it. "It marks ownership, or at least pretends to." He gave a slight nod. "And what of a bloodstain? Threat, proof, or bait?" "Indeed." He tapped the edge of the ledger fragment with one thick finger. "That cufflink was not left for me, it was left for her."
"Vivian."
"No," Wolfe said. "Lenore." That was new. He continued. "She lived unseen. She watched, but she saw too much. Someone fears her memory." I crossed to the file cabinet, pulled McVey's personal profile from the stack, and glanced at the back. No military history, no sign of mental illness, no flight training. Wolfe smiled.
"You're thinking too narrowly."
"Then enlighten me." He leaned forward. Jonas McVey did not intend to vanish in death. He intended to vanish in substitution. I stared at him. He planned to switch bodies? Yes, but the plan failed, either too soon or too late. That means, yes, Wolfe said. He was not the body found on the balcony. I turned slowly toward the ledger fragment. If that's true, then who was? Wolfe lifted a finger. That, he said, is why we must move now.
He reached for the phone again.
Saul is to remain on Vivian, Fred on Krupke, Orrie on Ebner. You, Archie, will return to the hotel. The Gotham? Yes. Speak to the night staff. Look at the body report again, the coroner's notes, the personal effects. You think they got it wrong? I think someone made sure they did. I stood. He raised his voice slightly. And check the laundry records. If there were bloodstains, someone washed them out.
He leaned back, picked up the handkerchief-wrapped cufflink, and turned it once more in his palm.
There is a story in that stain, he said, and I intend to read it. Saul Panzer didn't waste words. He used them like a scalpel, clean and efficient. When he phoned just after noon, his tone was light, but the message cut straight through. She's moving. Vivian McVey, widowed twice by rumour and once by law, had stepped out of her Park Avenue building in a charcoal coat, gloves tight, bag tucked close. Saul followed at a city block's distance, invisible to everyone but the street itself. She turned west on 63rd, slid between sidewalk shadows like she'd done it all her life. When she reached the storefront, she didn't hesitate. No window shopping, no glancing at the signage. She opened the glass door of a small gallery, no buzzer, just a chime like a bell at a funeral. Saul didn't enter. He stayed across the street, back to the wall, eyes on the window. Inside, Delia McVey stood near a sculpture, some modern tangle of copper and wire that looked like it belonged on the cover of a psychology textbook. She had her hair down, wearing navy, no staff in sight. Vivian and Delia moved to the back corner. Their posture wasn't casual. Delia stood stiff. Vivian's hands did the talking. The gallery had large front windows, but the inner walls blocked the view of their lips. Saul edged closer. He couldn't hear the words, but the body language told him enough. Delia pointed at the floor. Vivian stepped closer. Delia backed away, opened a drawer, pulled something out, a folder or envelope. Vivian snatched it, not gently. A beat passed. Then Delia raised her voice, not shouting, but sharp. Vivian dropped the envelope back into the drawer. They stood there, both silent, until Delia turned away, chin high. Vivian stayed a moment longer, then she left.
Not hurried, not slow.
She crossed the street and walked past Saul without a glance. He didn't follow, not yet. Instead, he raised his camera and caught a shot through the window. Delia, alone, hand pressed to her face. He didn't wait for her to notice. Saul arrived at the brownstone at 5. I let him in and guided him into the office, where Wolfe was resting his weight across the yellow chair, with both hands folded across his abdomen like a judge considering a verdict. "She went to 63rd, Saul said. Wolfe didn't nod. "A gallery. Delia McVey's." "Convenient," Wolfe murmured. "Private conversation. I couldn't hear it, but I got a picture." Vivian left angry.
She take anything? No, tried. Delia stopped her.
"What was it?" "Some kind of document. I couldn't see it from the street." Wolfe opened one eye. "She left with nothing?" "Yes." "And Delia?"
Alone? Shaken?
Wolfe sighed.
Very well, thank you.
Saul gave a brief nod and left the photo on the desk. It showed Delia in the gallery corner, one hand on the wall, the other pressed to her cheek. Her hair was out of place, her blouse had a wrinkle running up the side. Wolfe stared at it longer than necessary.
She's unraveling, he said.
I nodded. "And Vivian?" "About to vanish," he said. At 7:40 the phone rang. Fritz answered, then passed it to me. "Police," he said. "They want you." "Inspector Kramer," came the voice. "We've got a situation." I looked at Wolfe. He was already listening. "Delia McVey's apartment," Kramer said. "Upper East. She's alive, but barely." "What happened?" "Drugged. Something in a glass. Sleeping hard. No signs of forced entry." "She opened the door?" "No, but someone was there. Neighbors heard arguing." "And Vivian?" "Gone." I didn't answer. "She left no trace," Kramer said. "Her place is clean. Clothes, yes. But no purse, no keys, no phone."
Wolfe, without rising, said,
"She won't be found." Kramer scoffed. "Don't test me, Wolfe." Wolfe let the silence win. I lowered the phone. "She's missing." "Inevitable," Wolfe said. She's been missing from the beginning." I poured myself a drink I wouldn't finish. "She wanted something from Delia," I said. "Didn't get it." Wolfe turned to the photo. "And now Delia's unconscious, which means, she gave it to her. Or refused," Wolfe said. "But either way..." He tapped the desk once. Vivian ran. The next morning the brownstone smelled of burnt cinnamon and buttered rye toast. Fritz had done something clever with the leftover duck fat and hadn't bothered to announce it. Wolfe didn't speak for the first 2 hours. He sat with the photograph of Delia propped beside the ledger fragments, the cufflink, and the folded check stub. The office looked less like a study and more like a crime altar. At 9:15, Saul returned. "Delia came too," he said. I looked up from the notebook. Wolfe didn't. "She's foggy, doesn't remember much. Just that Vivian came back around 7. "Voluntarily?" "She knocked, said she needed to talk." "And?" "Delia poured 2 glasses of wine, then she woke up at St. Luke's." Wolfe opened his eyes. "No broken glass?" "No, nothing spilled, no sign of a struggle." "Means she drank it willingly." "Apparently." Wolfe nodded. "Was anything missing?" Saul shook his head. "Purse still there. Jewelry untouched. Desk closed." "But something was taken?" Wolfe said. "Something unseen." Saul didn't argue. Wolfe shifted in his chair. "Send Fred to the gallery. I want the desk examined. Every drawer, every file, anything that looks out of place or recently disturbed." Saul turned without another word. Wolfe reached for the bell. "Fritz," he said. "A glass of Kirschwasser." I blinked. "That's an indulgence." "No," he replied. "That's a reward." "For what?" "For confirming a theory." He lifted the photograph. There is no Vivian McVey. I froze. Explain. He gestured toward the gallery image. She's dominant, she takes. Delia recoils. But Delia had the key. You think Delia's the real wife? No, Wolfe said. I think neither is. I sat back. You're suggesting Jonas McVey married a fabrication, Wolfe said. A woman who borrowed another's name, or invented her own. But why? To vanish with him. He tapped the cufflink. And when that failed, she stayed long enough to clean up. Until the ledger turned up? Yes, he said. Then she ran. But she came back for one reason. What reason? Because Delia had proof. I rubbed the back of my neck. If you're right, I am. Then Jonas married a phantom. Lenore never divorced him. Delia was never his heir, and the entire marriage was part of the con, Wolfe said, including the death. A knock broke the air. I opened the door. Kramer barged in. He was red-faced, eyes sharp, trench coat unbuttoned. He tossed a folder onto Wolfe's desk. That's the report from St. Luke's. Wolfe didn't reach for it. Barbiturates, Kramer said. Mild dose, dissolved in claret. She'll recover? Physically, mentally, I don't know, but you're going to tell me what's going on. Wolfe exhaled.
Inspector, I believe the woman we know as Vivian McVey never legally existed.
Kramer's mouth tightened. You're reaching. I'm arriving. Kramer folded his arms. I want her found. You won't, Wolfe said. Not as long as you look for a widow. What do I look for then? Wolfe stood. A professional. An identity worn like a glove. She didn't kill Jonas. She partnered with him. And now? She's cleaning up the residue.
Kramer growled. This isn't theory. This is smoke.
Then watch the smoke, Wolfe said, and see what it chokes next. Kramer turned on his heel, muttered something I didn't catch, and vanished down the hall. I looked at Wolfe. You think she'll come back again? He shook his head. No, he said. She's finished with mercy. The office of Halberd, Winton and Carr took up half the 6th floor of a building near Wall Street that still smelled like fresh wax and old money. The receptionist had perfect posture and eyes that didn't blink unless necessary. She handed me off to a clerk named Riggs, a brittle fellow with narrow shoes and the sort of smile that always arrived too late. I assume you're here about the estate of Mr. Jonas McVey, he said. I smiled politely. You assume correctly. He glanced at my card again. Nero Wolfe's assistant. Something like that. We were seated in a room designed for deposits, not debate. Stiff leather chairs, thick glass water tumblers, and a portrait of someone who had never once taken the subway. Riggs pulled a folder from the filing case. The last will and testament of Jonas Horace McVey, witnessed and sealed, notarized February the 12th, 1948. He slid it across to me. I opened it carefully. The pages were typed, single-spaced, and dry enough to start a fire. But the language was clear. Primary beneficiary, Lenore Quinn McVey. Contingent, no contingent listed. No mention of Delia. No mention of Vivian. Not even a whisper of revision. I flipped the final page. The signature was unmistakably McVey's. So was the date. A full year after his marriage to Vivian. I looked up. Any codicils? None on record, Riggs said. Any challenge? Not yet. Anyone come looking for it? He hesitated. Not formally. I waited.
Someone phoned last week, he said. Woman, no name, asked if a revised copy had been submitted, said she was verifying an inheritance.
Did you recognize the voice? No. Accent? Flat, controlled, unremarkable. Did she ask about Lenore? No, only whether anyone else had been added. And was anyone? He tapped the page. What you see is what remains. I folded the copy and slid it into my briefcase. Thanks, Riggs. You've been saintly. He didn't know if that was sarcasm or not. I left him puzzling it out. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was seated at his desk, hands folded across a blank sheet of paper. His beer had barely been touched. The office was warm with the smell of cloves and oak polish. I handed him the will. He read it twice, then, Lenore. Lenore, I said. No Delia?
None.
No Vivian? Nope. He closed the folder and pushed it aside. The estate is valued at, rough estimate, $750,000, maybe more, real estate, stocks, unlisted holdings.
Wolfe closed his eyes.
So the living widow inherits nothing. The abandoned wife inherits everything. And the daughter? Not named. He sat back. The chair creaked softly. She claimed she saw no copy? Correct. She lied? Possibly. No, Archie, definitively. I nodded. So the motive shifts. Yes, Wolfe said. From revenge to possession. He turned his head toward the cabinet. And the ledger? I crossed the room, opened the drawer, and laid out the scorched pages again. He examined them in silence. The triangle appears beside entries dated within 6 months of the will, he said. You think it's connected? I think, he said, this ledger isn't record-keeping, it's insurance. Against what? Being erased. I paced to the fireplace. McVey never filed an updated will. He married Vivian, perhaps illegally. He listed no other heirs, but someone knew about this ledger. Yes.
And they've been trying to recover it ever since.
Wolfe nodded slowly. Because it names the shell companies. And maybe the accounts, Wolfe finished. The code is positional, cross-reference, a personal cipher. I turned. And Vivian? If her identity was false, she can't contest the will. And Lenore? She doesn't need to.
I returned to my chair.
So who wants the ledger destroyed?
Wolfe's voice was quiet.
Everyone. Wolfe sat for a moment, staring at the scorched edge of the topmost ledger sheet like it had personally offended him. He tapped the corner once with his knuckle, then reached for his beer and took a thoughtful sip. Archie, he said quietly, do you recall the phrase she used? Which one? The night she first appeared, when asked what she wanted. I leaned back. She said, I want you to find out who killed my husband and why. Wolfe nodded.
She never said justice, Wo. She said who and why.
You think she was fishing? I think she was cornered and needed someone else to hold the lantern. I crossed to the cabinet, pulled a red folder and flipped it open. Want the kicker? Always. I slid the folder toward him. Delia filed for guardianship of Jonas's estate 6 months ago. Quietly withdrawn 2 weeks later. Cited pending clarification of lineage. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. She suspected something, I added, or someone told her. Lenore? No, Lenore claims to know nothing. Yet she stands to gain everything. Exactly. He turned his head toward the orchids as if expecting one to bloom out of turn. Jonas kept his affairs deliberately entangled. A second wife, a false widow, a daughter omitted from the will. And the one woman with a legal claim claims she's been left in the dark. He nodded. A useful posture for someone who doesn't wish to be asked how she intends to spend the money. I paced slowly. The carpet muffled my steps. Outside, the fog was thickening against the windows. It had become part of the narrative by now. Wolfe gestured to the ledger. If this was meant to protect Jonas, then it only works if he's alive.
Precisely.
But if he's dead, it becomes a map, he said, to whoever held the keys after him. Vivian? perhaps, but if she disappeared empty-handed, then someone else has the rest. Wolfe reached for the bell. Fritz arrived in seconds. "Tea," Wolfe said, "and something bitter to match the afternoon." Fritz, with his usual efficiency, vanished. Wolfe looked at me. "I want to speak with Lenore." "She won't come here." "Then go to her. Bring Saul, if necessary." "To pressure her?" "To ask plainly," he said, "whether she knew about the ledger, and whether her name on the will was convenience or calculation." I grabbed my coat. "She won't talk unless there's leverage." "Then offer her a choice," Wolfe said. "What kind?" "Between inheritance and indictment." I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. "You think she'd poison for it?" Wolfe shook his head. "No," he said, "but I think she'd lie for it. And right now, lies are more dangerous than bullets." Lenore Quinn's apartment was exactly as I remembered it, dim, low-ceilinged, and scented faintly with lavender and regret. She opened the door, no hesitation. A woman ready for confrontation or company, depending on the shoes. "Mr. Goodwin? May I?" "You're already in the hall. Might as well."
Inside, I declined the offered seat.
"I have a question." "One?" "A big one." She waited. "Did Jonas ever promise you anything?" She laughed once. Not pretty, not cruel, just short. "He promised me everything," she said, and then vanished.
Did you know you were still the beneficiary of his will?
Her smile faltered. "No." "Did you check?" "I assumed I wasn't." I stepped closer. "That ledger, he didn't keep it for tax reasons. He kept it as leverage against you, against Vivian, maybe even Delia." She narrowed her eyes. "You think I wanted him dead?" "I think someone did, and I think you know more than you've said." Silence.
Then she looked away. "I knew about the ledger."
"For how long?" "Years before he left."
"And the will?"
"I suspected," she said, "but I didn't know until last week. I called the law office." I nodded. "Did you tell anyone?"
"No."
"Why not?" She turned back. "Because if I said it out loud, it would become mine." I watched her for a long breath. "If someone offered you the whole fortune with no questions asked..." She finished the sentence for me. "I'd say yes." I didn't doubt it. Back at the brownstone, I gave Wolfe the update in full. No edits, no assumptions. When I finished, he only said one thing. "The question is no longer who inherits." I tilted my head. "No?"
He looked up at me.
"It's who needs it most." The knock came at 4:30. Too early for dinner, too late for diplomacy. I opened the door and found Marvin Ebner standing on the threshold, breathing like he'd taken the stairs too fast. His overcoat was damp at the collar. His tie loosened. His briefcase dangled from one hand, and his other gripped the doorknob like it owed him money. "I need a word," he said, "with Wolfe, privately." Unless you're a doctor, mortician, or Fritz with a souffle, Wolfe doesn't do surprises.
Ebner exhaled hard. "Then consider this a legal emergency."
I let him in. He followed me into the office where Wolfe was seated in the yellow chair, eyes half-lidded, beer untouched beside him. "Mr. Ebner," Wolfe said without rising. Ebner dropped into the nearest red chair, like gravity had personal plans for him. His forehead glistened. "This has gone far enough." Wolfe said nothing. "I mean it. You've stirred a pot that doesn't belong to you." I moved behind the desk and stood still. Ebner leaned forward. "You're not part of the estate. You're not counsel. You've no standing." "True," Wolfe said. Ebner's voice dropped. "But you can walk away, quietly, without consequence." Wolfe's eyelids lifted a fraction. Ebner reached into his briefcase, pulled out a white envelope, and slid it across the desk. $5,000 in cash, clean, No names, no record. I didn't blink. Wolfe didn't breathe. Ebner cleared his throat. All you have to do is stop asking about the ledger. Let it burn. Wolfe looked at the envelope for a long moment.
Then he leaned back, brought his fingers together and said,
No. Ebner stiffened. You don't understand. I understand precisely, Wolfe said. You're afraid of something. Ebner stood, too quickly. His briefcase thumped the floor. You're making a mistake. No, Wolfe said. I'm declining an insult. Ebner's jaw worked behind his cheeks. Then he turned, stalked past me, and left without another word. The door shut hard behind him. Wolfe reached for the envelope, opened it, and fanned the bills once. Count it? I asked. He handed it to me. You may.
I didn't bother.
He's sweating for a reason, I said. Yes, Wolfe murmured. The walls are crumbling. That night, at precisely 10 minutes past 10, the phone rang. I answered. It was Saul. He's gone, he said. Who? Krupke. I straightened. How? Disappeared. Ebner's office was hit too. Broken desk, drawer forced. Someone was looking for something. Ledger? Maybe. Where's Krupke now? I've got a lead. Cheap boarding house on Delancey, paid cash, name's fake. You going? I'm already there. I hung up, relayed it to Wolfe, and waited. 12 minutes later, the phone rang again. Saul's voice was flat. He's dead. I closed my eyes. Drink? Glass beside the bed. Smells off. He never saw it coming. Anything else? No sign of forced entry. Window cracked. Room's clean. Too clean. I repeated it for Wolfe. He didn't speak.
Finally, he stood and walked to the fireplace.
There is no ledger, he said quietly. I frowned. What?
Not anymore. They believe it was destroyed.
But it wasn't.
No, Wolfe said. But they can't be certain.
I stepped forward. You think Ebner killed him? No, Wolfe said, but he tried to stop us from finding out who did. The morning came in cold, with a thin curtain of sleet icing the windows. Fritz served hot scones and apple preserves, but Wolfe barely touched them. He sat stiff in his chair, the scorched ledger page unfolded on the desk. Beside it, the unused envelope from Ebner. At 8:30, the call came. Kramer. I answered. He didn't waste a breath. Krupke was poisoned, bitter alkaloid, rat-based compound. Traces in the glass and in his stomach. Confirmed? Confirmed.
Entry?
None.
He paused. Whoever did it knew the room, or had a key.
I glanced at Wolfe, who didn't look up. Was Vivian seen? No. And if you tell me she didn't do it, I swear I'll throw this whole case in the East River.
She's missing, I said. Not invisible.
Then where's she hiding? Wolfe stirred. She isn't, he said, loud enough for the receiver. Kramer didn't miss a beat. Then she's dead?
No, Wolfe said. She's finished.
I relayed that. Kramer growled. You're protecting her. No, Wolfe replied. I'm protecting the facts. The line went dead. I hung up.
He's coming, I said.
Yes, Wolfe replied, but not for answers for a suspect. I returned to my chair. Krupke didn't talk, I said. No, but he did run. Yes. I pointed to the envelope. You think Ebner ordered it? No, Wolfe said. He panicked, but panicking men make calls. To who? Wolfe's fingers drummed the blotter. To someone who needed Krupke silenced, and who still believes there's a page missing. I stood. But the ledger's here.
To us, Wolfe said. But to them, it might not be.
And if they think Krupke had it, they eliminate him, Wolfe finished. Clean, controlled. The office grew still. Vivian didn't do this, I said quietly.
No, Wolfe agreed.
Then who? Wolfe opened his eyes. Whoever had access to the ledger before it burned. I nodded. Lenore? She knew of it. She feared it. And Ebner? He handled the shell companies. He knew the paper trail. I tapped the folder. If this was insurance... Wolfe turned his gaze toward the window. Then someone cashed it in with blood. The doorbell rang. I didn't move. Wolfe's voice was calm. "Let him in, Archie." Kramer came in like a storm, held in a grey suit. He tossed his hat at the rack, missed, and let it fall. "I want her."
"She isn't here," Wolfe said.
"Then who did it?" Wolfe raised a brow. The man who feared what Krupke remembered. Kramer slammed a palm on the edge of the desk. "I'm out of patience." "As is the killer," Wolfe replied. Kramer lowered his voice. "You know something."
"I suspect something."
"Who?" Wolfe looked at me. "Archie?" "Yes." "Bring me the burned page." I laid it flat across the desk. Wolfe turned it toward Kramer. "This," he said, "shows a transfer dated the week before McVey's fall. It involves a company Ebner registered to a name that doesn't exist."
Kramer leaned in.
"Vivian McVey?" Wolfe shook his head. "No, Delia McVey." I froze. Kramer stared. "She was the signature?" he asked. "No, but the company was registered in her name, which means someone forged it, or used her as cover." "Who?" "Ebner," Wolfe said. "Or whoever paid him."
Kramer frowned.
"You think Delia?"
"No," Wolfe said. "Delia was a shield, not a sword."
Kramer straightened. "You think she's next?" "No," Wolfe said. "She's the key." The room was quiet, except for the subtle tick of the mantel clock and the murmur of New York beyond the drapes. Wolfe had not moved in hours. He sat like a marble statue in his yellow chair, arms folded over the gentle slope of his stomach, eyes closed, but alert, always alert. The fire had burned low. Fritz had offered to stoke it. Wolfe declined. I stayed at my desk with nothing but the city edition and a legal pad filled with names, dates, and frustration. The ledger was still folded neatly. The cufflink was gone, sealed in Fritz's cabinet with the brandy. We weren't waiting for an answer. We were waiting for the question to change. At 5 minutes past 6, Wolfe stirred. He opened his eyes, blinked once, and said, "Archie?" I set the pencil down. "Yes?" "Sit. I'm all ready properly."
I slid the notebook away and faced him. His voice was low, measured. "You know the fall wasn't clean."
"Right."
"And the corpse wasn't questioned."
"It was burned, rushed, and poorly handled." "Yes." He shifted in his chair. "I believe Jonas McVey is alive." I blinked. "Say that again?"
"You heard me."
I leaned forward.
"Alive as in was never on that balcony."
"Yes." I waited. Wolfe didn't rush. He planned to vanish. We know that. The shell companies, the missing pages, the false marriage. But he didn't just want to disappear. He wanted a body to take his place. So the fall was a substitution, but the plan went wrong. "How?" He steepled his fingers. "Someone else was pushed." I stared. You're saying he didn't fake the fall, someone else fell?" "Yes."
"Who?"
"I don't know," Wolfe said. "Not yet, but I know what McVey needed." He turned toward the desk.
A body no one would question. A hotel room with limited access. A false identity.
He paused. "A witness, perhaps, to mislead the timeline." "Vivian? Perhaps, or perhaps not."
I stood and paced.
"So, he fakes the scene, someone else dies, the ledger survives, but he doesn't get it." "No," Wolfe said. "Someone else took it."
"Who?" I believe, Wolfe said, that's what McVey is trying to find out now.
I stopped pacing. You think he's still watching this unfold? Wolfe nodded. And he's killing to clean the trail? Possibly. Or trying to get the ledger back? More likely. I ran a hand through my hair.
Vivian?
Wolfe's gaze was still. She was part of it or not. If she knew, she was betrayed. If she didn't, she was used.
And the money?
Already moved. The ledger would confirm where. I dropped into the red chair opposite him. You think he's still in New York? I think he never left. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Not far, just enough to let gravity lend his words a certain weight. If Jonas McVey planned his own death, he said, he needed 3 things: a false corpse, a silent witness, and a reason no one would ask too many questions. I nodded. He got all 3.
But only halfway, Wolfe replied. The witness ran, the ledger survived, and now the trail is bloody.
I stood again. The heat from the fireplace was fading, but my neck had gone cold. Krupke knew, I said. Yes. Perhaps not everything, but enough. And someone got to him. Wolfe gestured to the folded sheet on the desk. Those numbers, Jonas didn't write them for Vivian. He wrote them for himself. As a backup? As protection, Wolfe said. Insurance in the truest sense. I narrowed my eyes. Then why not destroy it? Because he couldn't, not until he had everything else. He looked at me now, directly. Jonas McVey is hunting the ledger. And he doesn't know we have it? Wolfe shook his head. If he did, this office would already be ash. That made sense. So what do? We let him look.
You want to bait him? I want to corner him, Wolfe said. There is no other way.
I moved to the sideboard, poured a brandy, and held it without sipping. You think he'll come himself? Yes. And Vivian? She may lead him here. Or she may already have. She's been silent too long. I turned toward the fireplace.
What about Lenore?
She's a bystander, used like the rest. But if she learns what she stands to inherit, she might stop watching. And Delia? She is the thread, Wolfe said. She has the one thing McVey never accounted for. What's that? Conscience. I stared at him.
She saw something. I'm certain of it.
I nodded once.
Then we need her here.
Wolfe closed his eyes.
Yes.
I moved toward the phone. Archie, he said, just before I dialed. Yes? Do not let her come alone. The call came just before dawn. Saul's voice was low and even, but not empty.
The gallery's gone. Fire took it around 3.
I sat up in bed, reached for the lamp. Delia? Safe. She wasn't there.
Vivian?
No sign. She's still missing. Cause? Accelerant, back storeroom. I paused. Anything left? One thing. He drew a breath. They found a body. That stopped everything. Identified? Not officially, but I saw it, Archie. It wasn't someone passing through. Suit was tailored. Gold watch. The teeth. He didn't finish. I've already called Kramer. By the time I reached the scene, the street was a fog of ash and steam. The gallery was nothing but a charred skeleton. A half-burned sign still clung to one bent bracket, as if embarrassed it had survived. Kramer was there, coat collar up, eyes red from heat or temper. He didn't waste time. Back rooms sealed. One male, mid-50s, no ID, no wallet. Face?
Burned out, but the jaw survived.
And the watch? Engraved. He reached into his coat and handed me a photograph. I stared at it. J.M. Jonas McVey, I said. Kramer nodded once. Dental match just came in. Confirmed. I exhaled. So the man in the hotel...
Wasn't McVey.
And this man?
Was.
He pulled a cigar from his breast pocket. didn't light it. "We've been chasing a ghost," he muttered. I said nothing. "You want to know what burns worse than wood?" he asked. "What?" "Time." I returned to the brownstone with the smell of smoke in my coat and confirmation in my hand. Wolfe listened to every word without a blink. When I reached the end, he took the photo and laid it beside the scorched ledger sheet. He didn't speak. Just stared at them both, like they were two halves of a cipher. After a long moment, he said, "So, he stayed." "Yes." "And someone found him? Or he never left?"
Indeed.
He reached for the bell. Fritz entered. "Bring the others," Wolfe said. "All of them, tonight." Fritz nodded, vanished. I raised a brow.
Conclusion?
"No," Wolfe said. "Confession." The invitations were sent by noon. By 7, the room was arranged. Wolfe in his yellow chair, 2 red guest chairs angled just enough to make suspects uncomfortable. I handled the rest: ashtrays, water glasses, an untouched decanter of brandy, 1 cufflink, blood-stained, on a silver tray. They arrived one by one. Delia came first, pale, gloved, guarded. Then Lenore, wrapped in a thick grey coat, her mouth drawn tight. Ebner arrived last, sweating again. Vivian, of course, was not among them. Kramer stood near the bookshelves, arms folded. He hadn't asked to be invited. He'd simply come. Wolfe began without pleasantries. "Jonas McVey is dead," he said. No one spoke. "He died in the gallery Delia owned," Wolfe continued. "In the back room, in a fire set with purpose." Ebner cleared his throat. "That hasn't been proven." "It has," Wolfe said. Silence. Wolfe looked to Delia. "Miss McVey, you inherited nothing." She nodded. "Yes." "But your gallery, was it purchased outright?" "No." "Who paid for it?" Delia hesitated. "Jonas." Kramer stepped forward. "On the books?"
No.
Wolfe nodded. "Because he was hiding, using you." Delia looked down. "He came to me after the hotel incident, said he had to disappear. I let him stay at the gallery." Wolfe's tone didn't change. "Did he explain why?" "He said someone wanted the ledger." "Did you see it?" "No."
Wolfe looked at Lenore.
"You inherited his estate. I didn't ask to, but you kept the will quiet." She didn't reply. Wolfe tapped the cufflink with a knuckle. "This was left on our doorstep. A warning." He shifted to Ebner. "Your office was ransacked." "Yes." "Krupke was poisoned." Ebner flinched. Wolfe spoke softly. "You paid Krupke. You feared what he knew, but you didn't kill him." Ebner said nothing. Kramer stepped forward. "Then who did?" Wolfe looked at Delia. She was trembling. "He told you he'd clear your name," Wolfe said. "Said he'd rewrite the will." She nodded. "He lied." "Yes." "Did you confront him?" "I begged him to leave." "Did you pour the drink?" "No." Wolfe's gaze moved to the photo beside the ledger. "Someone else did." Delia's breath caught. "He was dead before the fire." Wolfe leaned back. "And that means one thing. Someone followed him." No one moved. Wolfe let the silence hold. Then he said, "Jonas McVey faked his death, but someone else finished it." He looked at Lenore. She looked away. Wolfe's voice was final. "And tonight, I will name them." Fritz set the table with 6 places, polished silver, candlelight at a whisper, linen the colour of cardamom. The roast duck was done to perfection, as expected. The soup was a consommé, clear, strong, elegant. No wine tonight. Brandy to follow. At 7 o'clock they came. Ebner first, shaved, shaken, wearing a suit a half size too large in the shoulders. Then Lenore, tight-lipped, black gloves, her spine straight as reproof. Delia came alone, wrapped in a wool shawl like a widow in exile. Saul and I escorted Vivian in at precisely 7:20. She did not speak. Wolfe was already seated. The yellow chair had been moved from the office to the head of the dining room table, placed in defiance of symmetry. He sat with his napkin already unfolded on his lap. He did not greet them. They sat. Fritz served. In silence, Wolfe waited until the main course was cleared. Then he spoke. "You are here," he said, "because you knew him."
No one asked who.
He folded his hands over his stomach. "You knew Jonas McVey as a husband, a partner, a client, a father, perhaps even as a ghost."
Ebner made a sound like he might object. Wolfe ignored him.
"You also knew a version of him that did not exist. That version died at the Gotham Imperial Hotel. Fell, we were told, from a balcony. No identification. Quick cremation. Hasty grief." Wolfe glanced at Vivian. But that corpse was not McVey. She did not blink. Wolfe turned to the table at large. "The man who fell that night was a vagrant, his body dosed, dressed, staged, a man without ties, a man with no one to ask questions." He let that sit. Jonas McVey planned to disappear. That was no secret to those who watched him shift money through names that weren't real, companies that existed only in a drawer. "Mr. Ebner helped him with that, didn't you?" Ebner's jaw twitched. "He created holdings in Delia's name, in names borrowed from the dead, and in the name of his so-called wife, Vivian." Wolfe reached for a folded sheet of paper, half burned, and tapped it once. This ledger was not accounting, it was a map of his retreat. He looked at Saul. "Mr. Krupke," Wolfe said, "arranged the vanishing act, helped secure the stand-in, acquired the drugs, but he made one mistake." Saul nodded once.
"He saw the real ledger."
Wolfe continued, "And that meant he had value until someone decided he didn't." Now Delia's voice entered. "Jonas came to me after the fall." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and told you it was all necessary, that the world believed he was dead, that he could rebuild." Delia swallowed hard.
"He said the ledger was gone."
"But it wasn't," Wolfe said. "Vivian had it."
The name dropped like a stone into water.
Wolfe did not raise his voice. "She found it weeks before the fall. She understood what it meant. The shell firms, the stolen names, she knew the truth. And when Jonas returned, when he came to reclaim what he thought was his, she killed him." No one moved.
He was found in Delia's gallery, in a room he used to sleep. The fire was set to obscure his face, but not his teeth, not his watch, not his name.
Wolfe turned at last to Vivian.
"You left the cufflink on my doorstep."
She stared ahead. "You wanted me to know someone was watching. You wanted me to stop." No reply. "You didn't plan the murder, but when the chance came, you took it." Her mouth did not open.
"You poured the wine. You slipped the powder. You locked the door behind you." Still silence. Wolfe leaned back.
"And that silence, Mrs. McVey, or whatever your name is, will be your confession." No one at the table moved. Vivian stared straight ahead, neither denying nor defending. Her silence stretched the air thin. Not fear, not guilt. Something colder. Resignation, perhaps. Or completion. Wolfe didn't prod. Instead, he turned to the others. "You were all used," he said, "one way or another."
His voice had softened, but it lost none of its weight.
"Delia, you gave him shelter. He used your gallery as a vault for his escape, and then as a coffin." Delia's fingers clenched the tablecloth. Her voice, when it came, was brittle. "I didn't know. I didn't think it would end like that." Wolfe gave her a nod, brief, not unkind. "Lenore, he said next. "He left you the money, but not the truth. He made you the face of legality, but kept you blind." Lenore sat stone still, her gloves folded neatly beside her. She did not speak, but something in her jaw relaxed. A clenched decade, unwinding. "Mr. Ebner," Wolfe said. Ebner flinched. "You managed the paper trail. You created the lies he walked across, but when they burned, so did your leverage." Ebner's mouth twitched, but no words came. Saul shifted slightly behind him, as if in silent reminder, "Don't run." Wolfe reached into the drawer beneath the sideboard and removed a small black book, frayed at the corners, brittle at the edges. He opened it and laid it on the table. "The original ledger," he said. Now Vivian moved, just her eyes, downward.
Wolfe continued,
This version was hidden behind a panel in the gallery, found by Saul before the fire reached it. It contains the final transactions, the ones you didn't want seen." He turned a page. "March 8th, transfer of $400,000 from a holding account in Lenore's name to a dummy escrow in Zurich. Signed."
He let the silence hang, then spoke it anyway.
"Vivian M." Kramer's eyes flicked to her, then back to the book. Wolfe shut it gently. "You kept the ledger to protect yourself, to ensure Jonas wouldn't discard you. But when he came back, when he stepped through that door and reached for it, you saw your future, vanishing like his past."
Vivian said nothing.
Not a twitch, not a protest, only breath, soft, steady, cold. Wolfe turned to Kramer.
"You have what you need."
Kramer stepped forward, slow and sure. Vivian looked up once, met Wolfe's eyes, and gave him something that might have been gratitude or loathing. Then she stood and let Saul guide her toward the front door, where another officer waited. As the footsteps retreated down the hall, Wolfe spoke once more. "Tell Inspector Kramer to have the coroner match the wine glass to the residue in Jonas's bloodstream. The lab will confirm it." I nodded. No one else moved. Wolfe remained in the chair, hands folded across his middle. Delia broke the stillness. "I didn't know," she whispered. "No," Wolfe said. "But you survived." Lenore stood next. "Is it over?" "Yes," Wolfe said. She turned toward the hallway and paused. "Thank you," she said, not looking back. Wolfe didn't respond. After they had all gone, Wolfe remained at the table. He didn't speak. Fritz cleared the plates in silence, then left brandy and 2 glasses. I poured. Wolfe took his slowly, letting the warmth settle. "She never said a word," I said. "No," Wolfe murmured. "She didn't need to." "Will they hang her?" "Not for silence." I looked at the book. She kept it close. "Yes." "For leverage?" "No," Wolfe said. "For memory."
I let that sit.
Then I raised my glass.
"To Jonas McVey."
Wolfe closed his eyes. "Let him remain dead this time." Rain glazed the city like a closing curtain, the kind that mutes sirens and keeps taxis idle at corners. It tapped the brownstone windows gently, steadily, like the last hand on a drum before silence. Inside, the hall light cast long amber shadows down the stairs. Vivian stood at the landing. She wore the same coat. Charcoal grey, belted tightly. Gloves, too, buttoned at the wrist. The same as that first night. Only now, no veil. And her posture was not folded in grief. She stood upright, her chin slightly raised. She wasn't resisting. She wasn't surrendering. She was simply finished. Kramer waited at the bottom of the stairs, hat in hand, coat damp at the shoulders. He didn't bark, didn't rush her. He let her take each step herself. Deliberate. Balanced. No hand on the rail. Her heels clicked softly on the wood, like punctuation marks on a page Wolfe had already written. When she reached the final step, she paused. Her eyes shifted, just once, to the vestibule bench, the same bench where she had sat, quiet, waiting, refusing to speak until Wolfe had agreed to see her. Now, she said nothing again. Kramer cleared his throat. "This way, ma'am." She turned. No handcuffs, not yet. The door opened. A grey car waited at the curb, its engine idling in the wet hush. She stepped out. Kramer followed, and the door closed behind them with a muffled thud. I returned to the office. Wolfe sat in the yellow chair. Still. Immovable. His eyes were closed, not in rest, but in retreat. The fire was low. Fritz had stoked it earlier, and the coals gave a quiet red glow. The orchids in the corner were silent witnesses, heads bowed in white bloom. I crossed the room and poured 2 beers, one for Wolfe, one for me. I didn't speak. He opened his eyes when I handed him the glass. Then he reached for the ledger, reconstructed now, 3 pages original. The rest, notes and copies. Saul's handwriting. My pencil marks. Wolfe's annotations.
He held it a moment, then tossed it into the flames.
It didn't flare. It caught slowly, curling at the edges. The spine cracked first, then the corners folded inward. The ink turned black, then grey, then disappeared entirely. We watched. Neither of us raised a glass. The last page turned in on itself before vanishing. Ash settled into the grate like dust on a ledger closed forever. Wolfe leaned back, fingers resting lightly on the arms of his chair. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. I sipped my beer. It had gone warm. Outside, the rain picked up, steady, determined, the kind that scrubs the streets, rinses away footprints, or tries. "She planned it, didn't she?" I said finally.
Wolfe exhaled slowly.
"No." He didn't open his eyes. "She reacted," he returned. "She chose not to vanish with him, so she erased him instead." I nodded once.
She left the cufflink.
"Yes." "Warned us." "Yes." "Why?" "She respected us," Wolfe said. "Or feared us, or both." I took another sip. She didn't say a word. Wolfe's voice came like closing a book.
"No need. Silence is a verdict too."
I stood, crossed to the window. The orchids near the sill had begun to lean, not from age, from weight. Even flowers have burdens. "You think she meant to be caught?" "I think," Wolfe said, "she understood that a life built on ashes ends in smoke." The fire popped once, a final crack of dry paper. I turned to him. "You regret taking the case?" He didn't answer for a moment.
Then, "No."
"But you hate how it ended?" "Yes."
I returned to my chair. We sat with our beers.
2 men, 1 fire. No more questions. Outside, a black sedan turned the corner and was gone. Inside, Wolfe's voice came at last, soft, full, final. "The dead," he said, "should stay dead."